So now that we have the ability system component added to our character, we can actually set it up to where when we fire our ability input pressed and released, it will actually go through and try to activate said abilities. So in the last video we did, and we made that logic, now we can go ahead and call these from it. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our ability system component, replace our log, and just simply call our ability input pressed and pass in the tag. Likewise, we're going to do the exact same thing and call ability input released, and likewise pass in the tag. So that's going to carry over and fire basically our try to activate and our release events, basically set up for our ability. So that'll handle what we need. However, we have two main things that are missing. First one is we never actually set the tag, so the input tag, as part of our dynamic ability tag. So that's something we need to set on our gameplay ability. And two, we need to actually set up a blueprint event for input pressed and released also on our ability, so that way we can handle it in blueprint. Not everything needs to be done via C++. So let's go ahead and tackle the tag first. So here we're going to have our gameplay ability. We're going to make a public section. Going to have a U property. It's going to be a edit anywhere just for simplicity. Give it a category of input, and I'll make it blueprint read only. Even though I doubt it'll actually be read, but it's going to be F gameplay tag, and this one's going to be our input tag. So what tag is going to be utilized to activate this ability? And then from here, if we go back to our ability system component, there is a particular function, which is when an ability is given, such as it is, has been granted to the component, can we actually, get ready to use it? When that fires, that's when I want to give the ability the dynamic, or the tag. So basically adding the input tag to the dynamic ability tags. So what we're going to override is on give ability. And we are simply going to grab our ability spec. We're going to grab our ability from the ability spec, which in turn means we have to also cast it to our input gameplay ability. So we're going to do a check. So if U input gameplay ability, let's go ahead and include that at the top right here. So we're going to we're going to call it ability. We're going to grab our ability spec and get the ability from it. So now we just need to cast it. So we're going to do cast to U input gameplay ability, and the type we're casting from is just going to be the gameplay ability. So we have our ability. Now we want to grab its input tag, so that's why I made this public here. So we have our ability spec. We're going to give the dynamic tags on that ability spec the input tag from the ability. So ability spec, search for dynamic ability tags. We're going to add a tag. The tag we're going to add is going to be the abilities input tag, like so. And we can make that a constant because we are only reading from it. So anytime we give ourselves an ability, we're going to check and see if it is of the type of U input gameplay ability. If it is, we can go ahead and grant it the tag. And that'll allow us to try to activate the tag via ability input pressed. Yeah, and likewise fire it off from ability input released. Now the only thing we need to do is very simple. We want to override the input pressed and input released functions on the gameplay ability. So if we search for input pressed, you will see that come up. And likewise, input released. And from here, we are basically just going to broadcast two events that we're going to create. So let's go ahead and create the on input pressed event. So declare, if I can spell, dynamic multicast delegate, no need for any parameters. And we're just going to do on input pressed. And the name's just going to be on input pressed. Well, actually, I'm being dumb because there's no parameters. For some reason I was thinking there was. Let's go ahead, duplicate the line, and call another one on input released. Okay, let's go ahead and make those events. So U property, they're going to be blueprint assignable. And the category, I'm just going to bind it again to input. So we have F on input pressed, on input pressed. Let's duplicate that and change it to F on input released and on input released, like so. And from there, we can go ahead and create the definitions for input pressed and input released. And all we're going to do is on input pressed, we're going to broadcast. On input released, we're going to broadcast. And that is literally it. So that way, anytime input pressed is fired and input release is fired, we also get the blueprint variations. So that way we can do things inside a blueprint that we might want to, such as, I don't know, if we want to end the ability on release, for example, we can do so if we have, say you had like you're trying to revive somebody, you look at them, you hold your input key, then you release it prematurely, you want to end the ability, you do so here. You can do it in C++ or Blueprint. Just entirely depends on, well, you. So that is pretty much it. So we're given the ability. We have ability input pressed, input ability release, or ability released. We're calling those through our character. So we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and launch and open up our character class. Okay, project's open again. Now that we're in our character class, we're going to go ahead and delete our tick and whatever that other one is, begin overlap. And on begin play, we want to go ahead and give ourselves a test by granting us an ability. So in order to do so, we also need to create an ability. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new blueprint class. And I'm just going to search for input gameplay ability. Name it GA underscore. We'll just call this one jump. And for the input tag, we're going to do that ability.input.jump tag that we created earlier. Go back to our character, and if we have authority, we're just going to grab our ability system component and give ourselves the ability of GA underscore jump. Compile and save. And we should still have our input data asset set, which binds jump to ability.input.jump. And inside of our gameplay ability jump, I want to print out when the ability is activated. So jump ability active. And under functions, should have, let's see, what was it called? So we have our on input pressed and on input released. So we can bind to those. And it just occurred to me that I did this in the way that I did not like. So what I mean by that is I don't want them to be actual delegates that you bind to. That's something that didn't click in my head as I was actually writing this. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and test this for now. And then we're going to convert them to actual overridable functions instead. So that is my mistake. So anyways, we are giving ourselves the jump ability. So when we press space, you can see jump ability active. When I press it again, nothing comes up because we haven't ended the ability. So basically, this ability is constantly, well, running. So we're going to test that by, one way we could do it is just simply calling, end ability. The other way is by triggering the end ability when we actually release the key. So what we're going to do is in the input gameplay ability, we're going to change these from being normal events, and we're going to make them just implementable blueprint functions. So U function, we're going to make this a, let's see, we shouldn't need this to actually be blueprint callable at all. So we're just going to make this a blueprint, if I can spell, native event. Category is still going to be under input. And we're going to rename this to just be a void on input pressed. Yeah, it's complaining about it not being implemented. Oh, duh. Okay, and in our .cpp, we are just simply going to call them as such, and let's go ahead and build and launch. All right, so that failed, and I think I was getting this confused with blueprint implementable. Yep, I was. So for some reason I was thinking blueprint implementable was a U property. Well, you know. Anyways, okay, not implemented any blueprint. That's fine. Now let's go ahead and try to launch again. Okay, and back inside of the engine. If you look over here, we now have the on input pressed and on input released. So we're going to print out for these. So on input released and on input pressed. So press space, we got on input pressed, we release, we got on input released. I press, release, press, release. So we're only going to be getting the release because the ability is still active. So we're going to do a quick little example. So after we print out the string, I'm just going to end the ability. So jump ability active, jump ability active, jump ability active. Nothing else is happening because the ability is ending basically instantly. So same frame as it launches. So we're going to move it to on input released. So when our input is released, we end the ability. So ability input pressed and it's active. We release it, on input released. Press it again, on input pressed, the ability is active again. We release, the input is now, well, released. And the ability ends every time we release the input. And every time we basically want to activate this ability again, well, let me rephrase that. So anytime we release the key, the ability is ended, meaning it can be then activated again. So that is pretty much the premise, and 90%, I think that just about is everything we're going to do in the prerequisites, because that's, well, actually, there actually is a couple more things that are, I guess, more or less optional, but they're more so the, what do you call it? Like, if you want to start with a set of abilities and maybe have some default gameplay effects, we're just going to add these to our ability system component. They're just kind of more or less, what do you call it? Quality of life additions. Just so, for example, we don't have to say give abilities manually, from the start, or do them in each character, for example. Instead, what we can do is we can just select our component. We'll have, say, an array like this that contains abilities and effects, and those are just going to be applied by default. So for the most part, you're basically done with the, the prerequisites for the series. So you can move forward if you want. However, I am going to be utilizing this additional grant defaults example that I just made in future videos. So anyways, if you still want to watch, I will see you in the next video.